Tao Te Ching was misread for 2,000 years. The structural problem of classical interpretation. What if I told you that the Tao Te Ching has been misunderstood for more than 2,000 years? Not because people were foolish, but because they were reading it the wrong way. What if Laozi was not writing philosophy at all, but leaving behind a manual for exploring consciousness? And what if modern science is only now beginning to rediscover what Laozi already knew 2,500 years ago? And here's the uncomfortable part. A few people have seen this, but almost no one talks about it. Because there is a deeper problem, a structural problem, in how the Tao Te Ching has been interpreted for over 2 millennia. Part 1. The most translated book after the Bible. Let me start with a simple question. Do you know which book in the world has been translated the most? The first is the Bible. The second is the Tao Te Ching. A text of barely 5,000 Chinese characters has been translated into more than 80 languages, with over 1,000 commentaries written about it. And yet, after 2,000 years of study, most readers still do not understand what Laozi was really describing. Not because the commentators lacked intelligence. In fact, many of them were the greatest minds of their time. The real problem lies somewhere deeper. They were missing an entire dimension of experience. Imagine handing a sailor's logbook to people who have never seen the ocean. They would read about waves and assume it was poetry. They would read about ocean currents and interpret them as metaphors for life. They would read about navigation by the stars and think it was philosophy. Every interpretation would sound intelligent. Every explanation might feel convincing, but all of them would still be far away from the truth. Because the book they are reading is not philosophy. It is a record of experience. Part 2. A radical hypothesis about reality. Before we go further, let me share a hypothesis. What if the universe is not fundamentally made of matter? What if the foundation of reality is consciousness itself? In this view, space and time are not the deepest layer of existence. They are more like interfaces through which consciousness experiences itself. Even the Big Bang may not have been purely physical. It could have been the arising of a thought within a cosmic mind. Now, this may sound mystical, but consider something interesting. Several major thinkers in modern science have suggested something very similar. Max Planck argued that consciousness is fundamental. Erwin Schrödinger suggested that consciousness may be singular. John Archibald Wheeler proposed a participatory universe. Cognitive scientist Donald D. Hoffman argues that what we perceive is more like a user interface. And philosopher Bernardo Kastrup suggests the universe may be a single universal mind. If that is even partially true, then this cosmic consciousness sounds remarkably similar to what Laozi called the Tao. If you want to dive deeper into this idea, check out my previous video, Consciousness, the Tao, and the Interface of Reality. Part 3. Why Laozi was misunderstood. Now here's the real question. If Laozi had already written these insights down 2,500 years ago, why has almost nobody truly understood the Tao Te Ching? The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Because Laozi was not writing philosophy. He was describing something else entirely. A practice report. A record of direct experience. A map of advanced states of consciousness. But for 2,000 years, people approached it with the wrong tools. Textual analysis, logical reasoning, philosophical interpretation. It's like studying a swimming manual while sitting in a library. Your theory may be brilliant, your reasoning may be flawless, but one thing will never happen. You will never learn to swim. Because swimming is not a concept. It is an experience. And to understand it, you have to enter the water. Part 4. 2 Modes of Consciousness. Taoist cultivation describes 2 modes of the mind. The first is the thinking mind, the one you are using right now. It analyzes, it judges, it plans, and it never stops talking. Modern neuroscience calls this the default mode network. It creates your sense of self, your personal story, your constant inner voice. But Taoist text describes something deeper, a different mode of awareness, the original spirit. This state appears when the thinking mind becomes silent. And modern research shows something remarkable. When experienced meditators enter deep states, activity in the default mode network drops. The brain becomes more synchronized, more unified, less fragmented, and people report something unusual. They are no longer thinking, they are simply aware. Taoists describe this moment very precisely, when the original spirit takes the lead. Part 5. Why I wrote Awaken the Tao. When I began studying the Tao Te Ching from this perspective, something shifted. Passages that once seemed abstract became surprisingly clear. Lines that looked philosophical started reading like instructions. Poetic language began mapping real inner experiences. That realization led me to write a book called Awaken the Tao. In this book, I explore a simple idea. What if the Tao Te Ching is not just philosophy, but a manual of consciousness? A guide to the inner states Laozi was describing. Because once you approach the text this way, many of its most mysterious passages suddenly become clear. My goal was not to reject traditional interpretations, but to restore something essential that may have been lost over time. Direct experience. Part 6. Meditation hidden in the text. Let me show you something. Once you see this, it becomes very hard to read the Tao Te Ching the same way again. Because this is where it stops being philosophy and starts becoming practice. Consider this line. Reach the ultimate emptiness. Maintain profound stillness. Most people think this is poetry. It's not. It's an instruction. Reach emptiness means letting the thinking mind fall silent. Maintain stillness means stabilizing that silence. And then something happens. All things arise, and I observe their return. Notice that word, observe. Not think, not imagine, not interpret, just observe. This is direct awareness. Part 7. The Valley Spirit. Another line says, the Valley Spirit never dies. For centuries, people debated its meaning, but meditators often recognize it immediately. At a certain depth of stillness, something appears. Not an object, not a thought, but a presence. Empty, silent, yet somehow alive. A field from which experience arises. An inexhaustible source. Laozi called it the Valley Spirit. Part 8. The Real Key. So why has the Tao Te Ching been misunderstood for so long? Because people focused on the words. But Laozi was pointing to something beyond them. Words are maps, but a map is not the territory. You can study a map for a lifetime, and still never visit the place it describes. Final ending. Laozi once wrote, in the pursuit of knowledge, something is added every day. In the pursuit of the Tao, something is dropped every day. Knowledge accumulates, but awakening removes. It removes noise, concepts, stories, the endless voice in your head. Layer by layer, everything unnecessary falls away, until one day, for a brief moment, the mind becomes completely still. And in that silence, something ancient begins to speak. Not in words, but in presence. For 2,000 years, people searched for the Tao, in books, in theories, in interpretations. But the Tao was never hidden in the text alone. It was always waiting, somewhere else, inside the one who is reading. And if you want to explore this more deeply, I've tried to map this perspective in my book, Awaken the Tao. Not as philosophy, but as something you can actually experience. Because if the Tao Te Ching is truly a map of consciousness, then the most important step is not understanding the map. It is walking the path yourself. And if, right now, as you listen, you feel even the slightest shift, a quiet sense of recognition, do not ignore it. Because that feeling may not be coming from these words. It may be coming from something deeper. Something Laozi called the original spirit. And if that has just stirred, even slightly, then perhaps, after 2,000 years, the Tao Te Ching has finally begun to be understood. Before we close this video, I want to ask you something. Not for an answer, but for a moment of awareness. Have you ever experienced a moment of complete stillness, where thinking stops, but awareness remains? If Laozi was describing something real, have you ever touched it? Or have you only been thinking about it? And now a simple question. Right now, are you thinking, or are you aware of thinking?